So in front of me is the entire Air family of drones, and over the years, there have been quite a good amount of changes. The original Mavic Air came out back in January of 2018 and had a really sleek design. This was a great offering from DJI, but fell short to some because of the weak Wi-Fi transmission system that limited how far you could fly the drone. The second generation of the Mavic Air here dropped a little over 2 years later in April of 2020 and finally brought DJI's mid-tier offering up to par with a brand new remote, a design that resembled the larger Mavic Pro, the strong and reliable ActiveTrack transmission system, and the camera even got a bump with a new quad-bear sensor that could capture 48 megapixel photos and 4K video at 60 frames per second. At the time, this made the choice between the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic Air 2 really difficult because even though the Mavic 2 Pro had better specs and it had a larger camera sensor, the Air 2 could take higher resolution photographs and also could capture 4K video at 60 frames per second, whereas the Mavic 2 Pro was limited to 30 frames per second. So those two things alone were swaying people to purchase the Air 2 over the 2 Pro. Now fast forward exactly 1 year later in April of 2021, DJI decided to drop a mid-cycle refresh of the Mavic Air 2 with the Air 2S that upgraded the previous drone in 3 fundamental ways. It added a new camera with a 1-inch sensor, it upgraded the transmission system, being the first drone with OcuSync 3 or O3, and it added these new upward obstacle avoidance sensors that actually worked both upwards and forwards when the drone was pitched in that direction. It was a pretty cool design that added great functionality. And so here we are in July of 2023, and we finally have an upgrade, a replacement to DJI's mid-tier drone, the Air 2S, with the brand new Air 3. Now at the time when the Air 2S came out, I kind of thought that that warranted to be a generational upgrade from the Mavic Air 2. I was wondering why they didn't call it the Air 3 because it gave us a new camera, a new transmission system, and a new obstacle avoidance system, right? 3 big upgrades I thought warranted a generational leap, even though we kind of had the same exact airframe. But now that I've seen the extent that DJI goes to make these generational upgrades, I mean, this is basically a brand new drone from the ground up. I now understand that they go to these huge lengths when making these upgrades from one generation to the next. So the best way to describe the Air 3 here is that it's like a little brother to the larger Mavic 3 Pro. It has a lot of the same features and functionality like omnidirectional obstacle avoidance, a crazy long 46-minute flight time, a dual camera system, and it actually offers some upgrades like the new O4 transmission system. This means that we've officially run into another problem, another predicament like we were in with the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic Air 2. The Mavic 2 Pro was of course the better drone, it was larger and more expensive, but the Mavic Air 2 offered a lot of the same functionality in a smaller package and was also less expensive. And I would say that the the Air 3 here probably offers 75 to 80% of what the Mavic 3 Pro offers, and then there's also a little bit more on top of that, like I mentioned, the O4 transmission system, and it's also smaller and it's also less expensive. So you've got to wonder, like with the Mavic 3 Pro, is the larger 4/3 sensor and the extra 166mm focal length camera worth it, or would you rather save some money and some room in your bag and go with the less expensive Air 3? This is a predicament that I'm actually finding myself to be in as well, choosing which drone I want to use because this does save a good amount of room in my backpack, but the Mavic 3 Pro's camera is just so good with the larger sensor. Don't worry, we'll be comparing those drones as well as some others in future videos here in the coming weeks, so be sure to stay tuned here on the channel to kind of see that comparison on its own more in depth. For this video, I really just want to focus on the Air 3 itself and cover what this drone is capable of. So how about we start with the body, the design, the actual aircraft itself. This drone is actually substantially larger than previous Air drones with a larger footprint when it's fully unfolded, but this is all for good reason as it's let them beef up what their mid-tier drone can do. For example, we now have an upgraded set of sensors that can cover every side of the drone, so no matter which way you're flying, when you're in the normal or cine flight mode, the drone will detect and avoid obstacles. These sensors are located on the front, the back, and bottom side of the drone. Even though there are no dedicated sensors on the top of the drone, these side sensors are angled in a way that they can still see above the drone. So this drone has DJI's upgraded obstacle avoidance camera hardware. If you compare these to DJI's older drones, the camera hardware was way smaller. These new cameras have a larger field of view and can see the world around it in a higher resolution with more clarity. So the system will be way more reliable all around. On the topic of changes, the new battery that gives us up to 46 minutes of flight time is this new tube design, much like the Mavic 3. DJI's Mavic series has always had a tendency to use the battery as part of the design of the drone itself, so it kind of clipped in from the top. This new design allows DJI to create a larger battery and creates a more rigid hull all the way around. Really quickly, I've also got to point out the placement of the pins or the terminals here on the Air 3 battery. It's kind of tucked up towards the end. It's nice and safely protected from any sort of accidental drops, whereas with the Mavic 3 battery being on the very end, You don't know how many times I've gone through Mavic 3 batteries having to recycle them because they've fallen out of my backpack or out of my hand onto asphalt, landed on those terminals, and any sort of force is going to mess these up and make that battery completely unusable. So I've gone through some batteries because of that, and it's nice to see that the Air 3 has them tucked away and more well protected. On the topic of batteries, I just want to point out this design of the charging hub that you can buy standalone or that comes with the Fly More combo. This thing is beefy and charges 3 batteries, but the size of this thing is unnecessary in my opinion. If you look at the charging hubs that have come with DJI drones over the past couple of years, they all look different, right? And they all charge different batteries that have different designs that go with different drones. So I can understand that there is some variety here, and I can kind of appreciate the different designs and what they all offer, but this is massive. This Air 3 charging hub is just ridiculously big. I mean, look at the Avata charging hub here. Look at how skinny this is, and this charges up to 4 total batteries, not only 3. Why could we not have something like this that's easy to throw on the side of your backpack and go? This almost feels like you're a liability. Now, I will say that you can maybe kind of use this as a battery case. The batteries can fit inside of here, but at the end of the day, I think that this is just overly sized for what we need in a charging hub. There is, however, a cool little quirk about this battery hub that I figured I would share though. By holding down the function or power button, it'll trigger what DJI calls a power accumulation function, in which the energy in the batteries that are lower in charge transfer to the battery with the most charge remaining. As soon as the LED on the side turns from yellow to green, you'll let go and the process will begin. The battery that is receiving power will blink through its LEDs like a normal charge, and the battery that is draining its energy will illuminate its LEDs solid as if it was turned on and inside of the drone. I have to admit, that is an awesome feature and almost makes it worth it to carry around this massive charging hub. Again, maybe use it as a battery case. I mean, you don't know how many times I've got 2 batteries that might be down to 25% that really aren't worth putting back up in the air because I'm just gonna have to land again, and then maybe 1 battery that has 50 or 60%. So if I could put all of the charge remaining in those 2 lower batteries into 1 battery and maximize my flight time, that's going to be a huge cheat code when I'm out in the field. So other than those 2 changes, the rest of the design is really similar for a folding drone. All 4 arms fold. They've got motors on the outside. There are LEDs on every arm for monitoring the status and understanding the direction of the drone in the air. The bottom has 2 obstacle avoidance sensors and 2 vision positioning sensors to help the drone fly steady. There's a single auxiliary LED to help see the drone at night in the air, and so the drone can better see the ground when landing in low visibility conditions. DJI has changed the USB-C port and micro SD card slot placement on this drone here, putting it towards the bottom and covering it with a flap to keep dust and debris out. I also really like these little notches on the top. It kind of gives me a Mini 3 vibe, but because the obstacle avoidance sensors are on the back of the drone, these little spots are used to tuck the propellers and hold them in place. So yeah, design-wise, this drone is very similar to what we've gotten from DJI in the past. It just has its own little quirks and design and styling features to make it unique in its own right. But it's what's under the hood that makes this so much different than the Air 2S and really puts it closer to what I would call Mavic 3 status. Now, we already mentioned the flight time, which is probably one of the standout improvements made with this drone. So now every drone from every class in DJI's lineup has over 40 minutes of flight time, which is just crazy to think. What really has me hooked though is the speed of this drone and its transmission system. The speed when flying horizontally and vertically has been substantially increased over the Air 2S, now making this just as fast as the Mavic 3. Even though the difference in speed between the Air 2S at 42.5 miles an hour and the Air 3 at 47 miles an hour is only like about 5 miles an hour, you can feel a huge difference in the flight characteristics between these 2 drones. Whenever I had the Air 2S in the air, it always felt like an Air. It always felt like the mid-tier drone that didn't handle wind and wasn't as punchy as, say, a larger Mavic 3 or even Mavic 2. But the Air 3 has completely changed that notion with new flight characteristics that I would say make this even more powerful than the Mavic 3. Like, just to give you an example of what I think is the most impressive, diving and climbing with this drone. Just flying up and down the Schuylkill River here in Philadelphia shows that this drone can really get after it, especially when you're moving vertically. You're able to drop this drone down to the ground so fast and vice versa. If you need to raise your altitude quickly, it's able to climb so fast. Even when you're flying full speed forwards horizontally while raising your altitude as quickly as possible, so this is when the motors are working as hard as they possibly can, you can maintain a speed of just around 40 miles an hour horizontally, while also achieving your maximum vertical speed upwards of 18 miles an hour. The first couple of times I had this drone up in the air, it actually caught me by surprise. Like, this drone does not feel like any of the previous Air drones. Numbers are one thing on paper, but you've actually got to experience the Air 3 and its speed for yourself to fully understand how much of an upgrade it actually is, especially over the Air 2S, but also over the Mavic 3 series, the Mavic 3, Mavic 3 Cine, Mavic 3 Classic, Mavic 3 Pro, that same airframe. The Air 3 here is quicker. I think that this is more agile and it allows me to do what I like to do best. Chase after boats, chase after cars, chase after any moving subject. This drone just moves effortlessly through the air. It goes exactly where I need it and it does it quick. And I can't really say that about previous Air drones. It's always been the mid-tier drone that really can't handle itself in the air, as well as the larger, more expensive Mavic drones. But now the Air 3 is the best handling Mavic style drone, foldable drone that DJI makes. I mean, just to kind of give you one more dumb real world example, I was taking some low level video of a pool at a home for sale and then wanted to transition to taking a shot that showed the entire grounds. With the speed of this drone, I was able to punch up and over the trees ridiculously fast. Like, even just looking at the live view from the camera really shows how quick this drone can move. Okay, moving on, now let's talk about range. And this is one of the more important things to discuss because DJI has upgraded the transmission system here in the Air 3. It now has O4, OcuSync 4, which means it's the top dog. It is the drone with the best signal strength as well as the best range that DJI sells on both their consumer as well as their enterprise side. Now, it's kind of funny because the Air 2S was the first drone to introduce O3, and the Air 3 now is the first to introduce O4. So it might be a coincidence, but it seems like DJI likes to introduce their new transmission systems with the Air series of drones. You know, at this point, there really isn't much to say about these transmission updates because DJI's OcuSync system is just so damn good. Like, without a waiver, I wouldn't even be able to take advantage of the full range this drone offers at 12 miles. But what's always nice about these upgrades is that the signal strength gets much better at closer distances. Like with O4, you'll have a better connection when your drone is within a few thousand feet away, ultimately resulting in an all-around better experience getting the photos and videos that you need because you've got a stronger live feed coming back from the drone to your remote controller. Now, even though this is a generational update, right, from O3 to O4, I haven't noticed all that much of a difference, and I've flown the Air 3 side by side with the Mavic 3 Pro in a lot of different environments, from the mountains up in Nova Scotia to locally here in urban environments like in Philadelphia and down at the Jersey Shore, and even out in the middle of nowhere in the deserts of Utah, and both of the drones handled phenomenally. I think that just goes to show that O3 was already really, really good, and at the end of the day, this is the main thing that separates DJI from the competition, their transmission system. I mean, what's a good drone with great hardware that's fast and has a great camera if you can't fly it more than 1,000 feet away without the signal breaking up? You bought your drone, you want to be able to fly it where you want to, you want to be able to get a good amount of range and be able to take good photos and videos, and that all comes down to the transmission system. Now, for those of you that might be wondering about specifics, there actually is a hardware difference between the Air 3 running O4 and any of the previous drones running O3, like the Mavic 3 and Air 2S. The Air 3 here has a total of 6 antennas on the drone itself compared to the 4 found on those previous drones. This means a stronger signal is being sent to and from the drone. This, however, isn't the only hardware difference when it comes to the transmission system. When you purchase the Air 3, you've got the choice of 2 different controllers. The RCN2, which is an upgrade over the RCN1, and the RC2, which is an upgrade over the original RC. So these controllers are very similar to their counterparts to the ones they're replacing. The only difference is they have that upgraded antenna hardware. So now each of these controllers, instead of having 2 antennas, have 4 antennas, further boosting the signal that gets transmitted from the controller to the drone. To dive a little bit deeper into our comparison, let's take the RC and RC2 here for example. The original RC only had built-in antennas that led to some people complaining about range. This go around, the RC2 has some built-in antennas as noted by the engraved marks here, as well as 2 external antennas that fold out. This design is actually very similar to the RC Pro, which has a total of 4 antennas as well, 2 built into the remote as shown by the engraved markings, and the 2 external antennas. This means that no matter which controller you end up choosing, the RCN2 or the RC2, you're going to get a great range experience, you're going to get a nice strong signal from both these controllers considering the upgraded antenna hardware in the controller and the drone. It really just comes down to personal preference. Would you prefer the less expensive RCN2 that's a little bit more rugged, you can throw it in your bag, use your phone, use your tablet, or would you prefer the built-in screen of the RC2? You can ditch the notifications from your phone, you can ditch your iPhone overheating, which always happens to me. For me, I would choose the RC2 just because you get that all-in-one experience, but I can understand that the RCN2 definitely is going to be favorable to some people. Okay, now moving into probably the most important part for most people watching this video, and that is the brand new dual camera system here on the Air 3. Now I want to spend as little time showing you what the camera looks like as possible and more time to look at the actual images taken from this camera. So let's quickly rip through these specs so that we can get to the images. Both of the cameras here on the drone are basically identical, with the main differences being the focal length and aperture. This actually is a comparable camera to the Mini 3 Pro with the same sized sensor and very similar specs. If you'd like to, go ahead and take a quick screenshot of these specs because I now want to roll into some example shots and give you my own personal rundown of what it's been like to take photos and videos here with the Air 3. So I think right off the bat, everyone is going to be up in arms about the sensor size. DJI has obviously gone with a smaller sensor than the 1-inch sensor found on the Air 2S, so on paper, you might read this as a step back. With the sensor being similar to a drone that is placed lower in their lineup, I can completely understand, but I haven't been letting that mentality hold me back from using this camera and getting great results with it. The photos and videos are tack sharp with great dynamic range, and in typical DJI fashion, the colors right out of the camera are great. To keep things in order, let's discuss video real quick because this is what I've spent most of my time using this drone for. I've been to Nova Scotia, Utah, and of course the Philadelphia and Jersey Shore area with this drone, and I've used it for a majority of my aerial shoots over the past month. So this is for clients on paid shoots and just for fun. To piggyback off of what I was saying earlier, the flight performance is really important when it comes to using a drone to shoot video because you want the flexibility to fly through the air freely and get creative with your composition. You don't want to be held back by a drone that flies like crap and can't stand some abuse. The speed and agility of this drone let me pick up right where I left off with my Mavic 3 Pro, which is a good thing. I didn't feel like I was flying a smaller drone and was able to keep up with anything I needed to do, like getting fast moving shots of the sweeping landscape up in Nova Scotia and chasing after some cars and of course some boats. From an image quality standpoint, I really don't have any gripes about the camera. The colors are great right out of the camera as I mentioned, and there's plenty of dynamic range for even those tough shots where you might be facing the sun when it's low in the sky. I really don't get into using the different color profiles on these drones because it just complicates the post-production workflow, and I typically end up bringing it to a result that looks just like the normal color profile would. When you're using the sun as your main light source for everything you capture, I find it the easiest to just keep it simple. As an example, this clip flying down low over the pond and then revealing these golfers looks great right out of the camera. Sure, you could get 10-bit color when shooting in HLG or D-Log, but I'm usually running and gunning on a daily basis, and using the normal color profile fits my workflow way better. Now, of course, we can't forget the dual camera system here, which, as I've mentioned in my previous videos about the new Mavic 3 Pro, I find it hard to live without. It's so easy to quickly switch between these cameras and capture different looking shots to really spice up your aerial sequence. This secondary lens gives you an equivalent focal length of 70mm, which makes for some absolutely epic opportunities to really compress your shot. Like, take a look at these different clips just off the coastline of Nova Scotia. This here is captured with the main 24mm camera, which shows off the immediate foreground really well, but the background drops off. Instead, with the 70mm lens, it compresses the entire shot and brings the mountains in the background closer for this really epic rising shot. Now here's the thing, that secondary 70mm camera that's found in the Air 3 is the same camera as the one in the Mavic 3 Pro, so both of them share the same 70mm medium tele camera. It's got the same sensor size, the same frame rates, the same video and photo resolution. It's the same camera across the board. That means that I can share with you these clips taken with the Mavic 3 Pro and not feel too bad about it, because I do want to hammer home just how important the 70mm focal length is, and having had the Mavic 3 Pro for longer, I've just been able to shoot more with it. For example, this road construction job I'm currently taking progression photos and videos of. From one end of the job using the 24mm lens, it's hard to see the other end of the rough roughly 3-mile stretch of road. Moving back, however, and compressing the image with the 70mm lens allows you to basically see the entire stretch of the job a lot more clear in one single frame. We also recently had a massive disaster here in Philadelphia with the collapse of the overpass on I-95. I've been documenting the progress of the demolition and construction, and the 70mm lens helped me zoom way far in to capture the small details of what the workers here are working on. I was able to stay a safe distance away and mix in wide shots of the entire project with the 24mm lens. Remember, you can switch between these lenses on the fly with the push of a button, which makes switching up your shot selection effortless. Just as another quick note regarding the Air 3's camera kind of versus the Mavic 3 Pro camera, with the Mavic 3 Pro, we've got two different sensors. We've got the 4/3 sensor and then the other sensor that's used for the 70mm lens. So two different cameras, which means you've got two different color sciences to deal with. And I've kind of learned how to color grade both cameras to make them look similar. But because with the Air 3, we've got the same sensor across two different cameras, the only difference is the aperture and focal length. Color grading is going to be much easier as the color science is basically the same across both cameras. Now here is something interesting. You can shoot vertical video with the cameras on the Air 3, but the camera housing, the gimbal itself, doesn't actually rotate. This is entirely done through software. So as you know, when you take a photograph, it is a 4:3 aspect ratio. This means that there's extra room above and below the frame when cropped down to shoot a 16:9 video. Well, in order to achieve a 9:16 or vertical aspect ratio, you can select this as a resolution and the drone will switch its screen to show a 9:16 vertical overlay on top of the 4:3 frame. This means you're getting a little more room on the top and bottom, and you can get a native 2.7K vertical image right out of the box, right off of the SD card. The results are good too. The video is nice and sharp, even though it's only 2.7K and not 4K. While I prefer the rotating camera system for shooting vertical videos and even photos because you get the full resolution of the sensor, I've got a feeling that it was a choice between a rotating camera system or a dual camera system on the Air 3 here, and if I had the choice, I would choose the two cameras every day of the week. Now I know everyone is going to want to hear about the low light video shooting here with the Air 3, and while the Mavic 3 is still the king in this regard with its larger sensor from the Mavic 3 Classic to the Pro to the Cine to the regular Mavic 3, that is just hands down going to be a better looking image at night. But due to the 1.7 aperture here on the Air 3, we do get a nice clean image at nighttime. I think it looks great, especially when using the night video mode that gives you a higher ISO range. You're able to get some really clean looking video clips at nighttime, cleaner than you would with say a Mini 3 Pro or an Air 2S or any of those older drones. So it definitely is a nice step in the right direction, and shooting at nighttime has become one of my favorite things to do. Now don't you worry, for those photographers out there, I didn't forget about the photos. DJI has come a really long way with their quad Bayer sensor technology. For those wondering, a quad Bayer sensor like the one found in both the 24mm and 70mm cameras on the Air 3 are 12 megapixel sensors with the ability to split each pixel into 4 to gather more light, giving you a total of 48 megapixels. This isn't always the best, as a true full frame 48 megapixel sensor would give you a better looking image than a quad Bayer sensor would, but you can't complain when you've got two of these sensors in one small camera housing on one small drone that can switch between focal lengths in midair with the push of a button. All these photos that you're seeing were captured at 48 megapixels in RAW and then edited, so you're seeing all of the dynamic range and color adjustments that you can pull from this camera. Again, like when shooting video, the color science has gotten so good that these photos look great right out of the camera, but a slight exposure and white balance adjustment really helps style these photos in. Also, for personal taste, I like adding a decent amount of contrast to really give these photos a punch. Now for my pixel peepers out there, with the 48 megapixel photos from this camera, you can really zoom in, and there's still a lot of detail there. On some of the first quad Bayer sensor drones DJI released, the pixels would kind of seem smeary when you zoomed in, but with this drone, they have really cleaned that up. It was the Mavic Air 2 that first introduced this new technology to DJI's drones, so it's only fitting that the Air 3 is the one to improve upon it and make it even better. Now, as always, I'm going to leave a download link in the description for you to take a peek at some of these sample files for yourself on your own computer. This goes for both photos and videos, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in picking up this drone or maybe seeing how it compares to the drone that you already have. Okay, wow, so that was a healthy amount of sample photos and videos to gaze upon captured on the Air 3 here. If I had to guess, you're watching this video on YouTube, compressed through the internet on your small smartphone screen. So if you want to get a better understanding of what these images look like, please check that download link out in the description, bring them onto your own computer, and go ahead and let me know your thoughts, because I think that there's a lot to love about the camera system here. But it's kind of brought me to a point where I'm wrestling in my mind, like, do I bring the Air 3 or the Mavic 3 Pro on my everyday shoots? Like, at one point in time, I ditched the Mavic 3 Pro, the Air 3 is in my bag, that is a drone I'm using for weeks on end, and then I go, hey, the Mavic 3 Pro is better. It's got a larger sensor. It's got a third camera, and it's sitting there in my closet. Why don't I just go use that drone instead? And then I make the switch again. And then I think to myself, man, I could crash this over $2,000 drone on just a small little real estate photo shoot. Why not go and get the Air 3? It's a great drone. It's got 48 megapixels. It's a higher resolution than the 20 megapixel camera. So there's pros and cons. The 04 transmission system, right? There's pros and cons. I'm going to kind of wrestle with that thought process over the next couple of months probably, which is going to be my daily flyer. But make sure you get subscribed on the channel, as in the next coming days, I'll be doing a full breakdown between Air 3 and Mavic 3 Pro to see which one is right for you. Okay, so moving on here, check out this list up here on the screen. This is all of the intelligent flight modes and flight features that have been built into the Air 3. With a newly upgraded obstacle avoidance system comes a new set of upgraded intelligent flight modes. Some of these are shooting modes, some of them are just convenience features, and others are safety features built in to ensure that your drone flies as safely as possible. I'm going to highlight the ones in bold that I want to cover in depth in this video, as they are the most important in my opinion, and I think these are the ones that most people will be using when they pick up their Air 3. So the first of these features is Focus Track as a whole. This feature is comprised of 3 sub-flight modes, so we've got ActiveTrack, Spotlight, and Point of Interest that make capturing video very easy. ActiveTrack, for example, puts the control of the aircraft entirely in the drone's hands, so it'll move through space horizontally, vertically, and it will adjust the gimbal to keep your subject of choice in frame. The Air 3 gets ActiveTrack 5.0, which is DJI's newest version of this software. When paired with those new sensors that we spent so much time talking about, it creates a really great autonomous flight experience with very little worry that the drone is going to crash, even in complex environments. In fact, I would say that at times it's a little too cautious, but I guess that's better than making risky moves resulting in a crash. Now, Spotlight is similar to ActiveTrack in the sense that when you select your subject, the camera will stay focused on that green box. This means that it will adjust the yaw or rotation of the drone, as well as the pitch of the camera and gimbal up and down. From here, you can move the drone in space, and it'll keep the camera trained on the subject of your choice. This is a really easy way to get smooth shots with very little input on the sticks. It's great for beginners or someone who's just running and gunning. Point of Interest, on the other hand, is pretty self-explanatory. It orbits a point of your choosing in either a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. It'll just spin circles around that point all by itself with no input on the sticks until you tell it to stop. Now, you guys know I couldn't do this entire video without talking about hyperlapses, and believe me, I have been capturing plenty of them with this drone on my travels. Unfortunately, you can't take 48 megapixel photos when taking hyperlapses. It limits you to 12 megapixels, but this drone, just like all of the others in DJI's lineup, are capable of capturing these awesome little video clips by taking a bunch of photos over the course of a slow moving flight. This feature really hasn't changed much from drone release to drone release, so if you want to check out my full hyperlapse tutorial, that will give you a good understanding of how to get the best results from this feature. The Air 3 is a great drone to use in particular because of its great flight time and ability to fight the wind really well. This and the Mavic 3 Pro will definitely be my go-to options moving forward. Moving along, the Air 3 here gets cruise control, which is a feature that has only been available on the Mavic 3 series. This is a great feature that can help alleviate fatigue on long flights and can help you easily nail a shot. So the way I mostly use cruise control is when jumping around from spot to spot. If I say need to fly half a mile out to a lighthouse for photos, I'll get the drone up to speed and then enable cruise control so that I don't have to continue to push the stick down. This can also be helpful to alleviate needing to fly the drone in a certain way to capture a certain clip. For example, if you're chasing after a boat, you can match the speed of that boat, enable cruise control, and then just worry about controlling the drone's position and gimbal placement. The drone will worry about keeping up the speed. Waypoints is another feature that was added to the Mavic 3, so the Air 3 is the first consumer drone from DJI outside of that series of Mavic 3s that can use this feature. This means that you can program points for the drone to fly and give it actions to complete at each point, like take a photo, start or stop a video, and hover. This is awesome for completing similar missions on a routine basis, or even for setting up complex shots that you might not be able to accomplish on your own, like a reveal or an orbit shot. Let me know if you guys would want to see an in-depth overview of this feature in the future, because there's a lot to get into here to really encompass how this works and how to use it properly. Wow, so there really is a lot to unpack here. Even though the Air 3 is so similar to the Mavic 3 Pro, the Mavic 3 Pro still has a place, right? Like, it still has a larger sensor in the camera. It still has that extra camera. It still has the upward sensor. It still has the ability to be used with the RC Pro, which is a better controller than the RC2. So I don't know. It's going to be tough for me to decide which drone I use on the daily. The Air 3 offers the portability aspect. It's a little bit less expensive, so I crash it. I don't need to replace a more expensive drone. It's got O4, right? It's a little bit more quiet than the Mavic 3 Pro, so yeah, it's going to be a decision I need to make, and I wanted to make sure this video wasn't as much of a comparison video as much as it was just about the drone itself, to cover what the Air 3 is capable of. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. I think that this is the upgrade the Air 3 needed, and it's going to be exciting to see where these drones go in the future, because the Mini 3, the Air 3, and the Mavic 3 are so good in their own rights. It's like, what more could we want in a drone? Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.